The sun was setting as passengers hurried through the bustling airport, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Among them was Maya Johnson, a bright-eyed 16-year-old with dreams bigger than the planes taking off outside. Dressed in her crisp school uniform and carrying a backpack filled with books, notes, and a small stuffed airplane her father had given her years ago, Maya stood out not just for her youth, but also for her quiet confidence. Today was special. She was heading to another city to participate in a national academic competition, an event she had worked tirelessly to qualify for. Maya's love for aviation wasn't just a hobby, it was deeply personal. Her late father, a pilot who inspired her fascination with flight, used to tell her stories about soaring above clouds and seeing the world from above. After his passing, those stories became her guiding light, pushing her to excel academically and dream of making a difference in the aviation industry someday. This trip wasn't just about winning a trophy, it was about honoring her father's legacy. As she approached the gate, Maya felt a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. She handed her boarding pass to the agent with a polite smile and stepped onto the plane. The cabin buzzed with chatter as families settled into their seats. Business travelers typed on laptops, and children played quietly. Maya found her assigned seat near the window and stowed her bag under the seat in front of her. She loved window seats. They reminded her of the view her dad always talked about: endless skies and fluffy white clouds stretching as far as the eye could see. But little did Maya know, this ordinary flight would soon turn into anything but routine. As the minutes ticked by, the plane began filling up. A flight attendant named Carla moved briskly down the aisle, checking overhead bins and ensuring everything was secure. When she reached Maya's row, she paused, frowning at the slight bulge of Maya's backpack peeking out from under the seat. "Excuse me," Carla said sharply, tapping Maya's shoulder. "That bag needs to be fully tucked in." Startled, Maya quickly bent down to adjust it. "Sorry, Mom," she replied softly, doing her best to comply. But instead of moving on, Carla lingered, crossing her arms. "You should have done that before we started boarding," she snapped, her tone growing harsher. Passengers nearby glanced over, some curious, others uncomfortable. Maya tried to explain. "I thought I had enough space." But Carla cut her off. "This isn't optional. If you can't follow basic instructions, maybe you shouldn't be here." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment as the confrontation escalated. Despite her calm responses, Carla refused to back down, eventually calling for a supervisor. Within moments, Maya found herself being escorted off the plane, her heart sinking with every step. As she stood alone at the gate, clutching her belongings, she couldn't believe what had just happened. What was supposed to be the start of an incredible journey had turned into a nightmare. Unbeknownst to Maya, however, someone was watching. From a private jet parked nearby, Eleanor Whitmore, a billionaire CEO known for her sharp instincts and passion for justice, observed the entire scene unfold through live surveillance footage. Something about Maya caught Eleanor's attention. It wasn't just the unfairness of the situation or the girl's composed demeanor despite the chaos. There was something extraordinary about Maya, something that made Eleanor sit up straighter and take notice. And as the evening wore on, Eleanor decided that this young girl might just hold the key to solving problems far greater than either of them realized. Maya sat on a cold, hard bench at the gate, her mind racing with emotions. Humiliation, anger, and disbelief swirled inside her as she replayed the scene over and over in her head. How could something so small, a backpack slightly sticking out, turn into such a big deal? She had followed the rules, or at least tried to, but it didn't seem to matter. The flight attendant's harsh words still echoed in her ears. "If you can't follow basic instructions, maybe you shouldn't be here." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but Maya blinked them away. Crying wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she pulled out her phone to call her mom, hoping for some comfort. Before she could dial, however, a shadow fell over her. Startled, she looked up to see a tall, elegantly dressed woman standing there. Her sharp features were softened by a warm smile, and her piercing gaze seemed to look right through Maya. "Hi," the woman said gently, sitting down beside her without waiting for an invitation. "I saw what happened back there. Are you okay?" Maya hesitated. Strangers didn't usually approach her like this, especially not ones who looked so polished and put together. But there was something about the woman's tone, kind yet firm, that made Maya feel safe enough to nod. "I'm fine," she mumbled, though her trembling voice betrayed her. The woman introduced herself as Eleanor Whitmore. At first, Maya didn't recognize the name, but when Eleanor casually mentioned she worked in aviation, Maya's curiosity piqued. They began talking, and slowly, Maya opened up. She told Eleanor about the competition she was supposed to attend, how much it meant to her, and how unfair she thought the situation on the plane had been. Eleanor listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When Maya finished, Eleanor leaned back, studying her thoughtfully. "You handled that incredibly well," she said finally. "Most people would have lost their temper, but you stayed calm. That takes strength." Maya shrugged, unsure how to respond. Strength wasn't a word she associated with herself. She felt more like someone who'd just been knocked down and wasn't sure how to get back up. Eleanor changed the subject, asking Maya about her interests. As they talked, Maya revealed her passion for aviation, sparked by her father's stories of flying. She even admitted her dream of one day working in the industry, though she quickly added, "That probably sounds silly coming from a teenager." "Not at all," Eleanor replied firmly. "Dreams are important. They drive us to do things we never thought possible." There was a glimmer of admiration in her eyes, though Maya didn't notice. After a while, Eleanor glanced at her watch and stood up. "Listen, I have some time before my next meeting. Would you like to grab lunch?" "My treat." Maya hesitated again, but something about Eleanor's genuine demeanor made her say yes. Over burgers and fries at a nearby cafe, the conversation deepened. Eleanor asked thoughtful questions, encouraging Maya to share more about her life, her goals, and her frustrations. For the first time since the incident, Maya felt heard. It was as if Eleanor truly understood what she was going through, not just the embarrassment of being kicked off the plane, but the larger sense of injustice she carried as a young black girl navigating a world that often dismissed her. As dessert arrived, Eleanor leaned forward, her expression serious. "Maya, I need to tell you something. I'm not just someone who works in aviation. I own the airline you were supposed to fly with today." Maya's jaw dropped. She stared at Eleanor, stunned. "I'm sorry for what happened to you," Eleanor continued. "It was wrong, and it has no place in my company or anywhere else. But I also see potential in you. You're smart, resilient, and compassionate. Those are qualities the world needs more of, especially in leadership." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then, almost casually, she added, "Which is why I want to offer you a chance to make a real impact. What would you say if I told you I'm stepping down as CEO of my airline, and I think you should take my place?" For a moment, Maya thought she must be dreaming. Surely, this couldn't be real. Yet the sincerity in Eleanor's eyes told her otherwise. As the enormity of the offer sank in, Maya realized her life might never be the same again. Maya stared at Eleanor, her mind struggling to process the words she had just heard. "Wait, what?" she stammered, setting down her glass of soda as if it might spill from the sheer shock of the moment. "You want me, a 16-year-old, to run your airline? Are you serious?" Eleanor chuckled softly, leaning back in her chair with an amused smile. "Dead serious," she replied. "I've been looking for someone special to take over my company for a while now. Someone who understands fairness, resilience, and the importance of doing what's right, not just what's profitable. And today, I think I found her." Maya shook her head, still trying to wrap her brain around the idea. "But I'm just a kid. I don't know anything about running a business, let alone an entire airline. People will laugh at me. They'll think this is some kind of joke." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her expression turning thoughtful. "Do you really believe that? Or are you assuming how others will react before they even have a chance to see what you're capable of?" She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Let me tell you something, Maya. When I started my company decades ago, everyone doubted me too. They said I was too young, too inexperienced, too idealistic. But I proved them wrong because I believed in myself, and because I surrounded myself with people who believed in me too." Maya frowned, chewing on her lower lip as she considered Eleanor's words. It was true that she'd always dreamed of making a difference in the aviation industry, but this felt like stepping straight into a hurricane without an umbrella. "Even if I wanted to try," she said slowly, "how would I even begin? Running an airline sounds impossible." "That's where I come in," Eleanor said with a reassuring nod. "I'm not asking you to do this alone. If you accept, I'll stay on as your advisor for as long as you need me. You'll have access to the best mentors, trainers, and resources in the world. Think of it as learning to fly a plane. You won't be expected to land it perfectly on your first attempt. But with practice, guidance, and determination, you'll get there." Maya glanced out the window, watching planes taxi along the runway in the distance. The thought of leading an airline both thrilled and terrified her. On one hand, it was an opportunity to reshape an industry she loved, to create a company that stood for fairness and inclusion. On the other hand, the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. What if she failed? What if she let Eleanor, and herself, down? Sensing her hesitation, Eleanor reached across the table and placed a gentle hand over Maya's. "You don't have to decide right now," she said kindly. "Take your time. Think about it. But remember this. Sometimes life gives us chances to do something extraordinary, even when we feel unprepared. Those moments rarely come twice." The rest of their meal passed in quiet conversation, with Eleanor sharing stories of her own journey and offering advice on leadership. By the time they finished dessert, Maya's initial panic had given way to cautious curiosity. Maybe this wasn't as crazy as it seemed. Maybe, just maybe, she could rise to the challenge. As they left the cafe, Eleanor handed Maya a business card with her personal phone number written on the back. "Call me whenever you're ready to talk," she said with a warm smile. "No pressure. Just promise me one thing. Don't let fear stop you from taking the leap of faith." Maya nodded, clutching the card tightly in her hand. As she watched Eleanor walk away, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the start of something incredible or the wildest idea anyone had ever had. Either way, she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. The next morning, Maya woke up with Eleanor's words still swirling in her mind. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their conversation over and over. Could she really do this? The idea of becoming the CEO of an airline was so far beyond anything she'd ever imagined for herself. Yet, deep down, a tiny spark of excitement flickered to life. What if this was her chance to make a real difference, not just for herself, but for others like her who had faced unfairness and discrimination? After hours of tossing and turning, Maya finally made up her mind. She would at least hear Eleanor out. If nothing else, it might be an opportunity to learn something new. With that thought, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the business card Eleanor had given her. "Good morning, Maya," Eleanor answered almost immediately, her voice warm and inviting. "I was hoping you'd call. I've been thinking about what you said," Maya began hesitantly, "and I'm willing to listen. But I need to understand more before I can say yes." "Of course," Eleanor replied. "Why don't we meet later today? I'll take you to the headquarters, introduce you to the team, and show you how everything works. No commitments yet, just an open mind." By mid-afternoon, Maya found herself standing outside a towering glass building that housed the airline's corporate offices. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, feeling completely out of place among the sharply dressed professionals bustling around. Eleanor greeted her with a reassuring smile and led her to a sleek conference room where several executives were already seated. Maya froze for a moment, suddenly aware of how young she looked compared to everyone else. The men and women around the table exchanged curious glances, some raising eyebrows while others whispered quietly. One man even smirked, clearly skeptical of why a teenager was being brought into such a high-stakes meeting. Eleanor cleared her throat, silencing the murmurs. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her tone commanding respect. "As many of you know, I've decided to step down as CEO due to personal reasons. Before doing so, I want to ensure the future of this company is in capable hands, hands that truly understand our values and mission. That's why I've chosen Maya Johnson as my successor." A wave of disbelief rippled through the room. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others outright scoffed. "With all due respect, Ms. Whitmore," one woman said cautiously, "she's just a child. How can she possibly lead a multi-billion-dollar corporation?" Maya felt her cheeks burn, but Eleanor didn't miss a beat. "Age doesn't determine capability," she shot back firmly. "Maya may be young, but she possesses qualities most of us lose along the way. Integrity, empathy, and a fresh perspective. Those are exactly what this company needs right now." Taking a deep breath, Maya stood up, surprising even herself. All eyes turned to her, and for a moment, she felt paralyzed. Then she remembered her father's voice telling her stories of courage and resilience. Slowly, she began to speak. "I know I'm not what you expected," she admitted, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "And honestly, I wasn't expecting this either. But I believe in fairness. I believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. This company has a chance to set an example, to show the world that aviation can be inclusive and innovative at the same time. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to learn. And I'm willing to work harder than anyone else to make sure this airline succeeds." The room fell silent. For a few tense seconds, no one spoke. Then, to Maya's surprise, a round of applause broke out. It started with Eleanor, then spread to a few others, until the entire room joined in. Not everyone looked convinced. Some still wore expressions of doubt. But there was a newfound respect in their eyes. Eleanor smiled proudly, giving Maya a subtle nod of encouragement. "Let's give her a trial period," she suggested. 3 months. If she proves herself, we'll officially appoint her as CEO. Does that sound fair?" Reluctantly, the board agreed. As the meeting ended, Maya exhaled deeply, realizing she had just taken the first step toward the biggest challenge of her life. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Maya's first day as the interim CEO of the airline was nothing short of overwhelming. Walking into the headquarters, she felt like a tiny fish swimming in an ocean full of sharks. The board had agreed to give her 3 months to prove herself, but the skeptical glances and whispered conversations behind closed doors made it clear that not everyone believed she could succeed. Still, Maya reminded herself why she had accepted the challenge: to make a difference, to stand up for fairness, and to honor her father's memory. Her first order of business was meeting with the leadership team, a group of seasoned executives who had decades of experience between them. They gathered in the same conference room where Maya had given her speech, their expressions ranging from polite curiosity to outright disbelief. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, ready to guide Maya through the process, but this was Maya's moment to take charge. "Thank you all for being here," Maya began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "I know some of you might think I'm too young or inexperienced to lead this company. And honestly, you're probably right. I don't have years of corporate experience, but what I do have is a fresh perspective, a willingness to listen, and a commitment to doing what's right." She paused, looking around the table. "This airline has been struggling, not just financially, but also in how it treats its employees and passengers. We've lost trust, and without trust, we can't grow. My goal is to rebuild that trust, starting today." The room fell silent. One of the executives, a man named Greg, leaned forward. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Changing public perception isn't easy, especially when incidents like yesterday's happen. Maya nodded, knowing he was referring to her own experience of being kicked off the plane. "You're right. It won't be easy. But it starts with accountability. For example, the flight attendant who treated me unfairly. She needs to face consequences for her actions. That sends a message that discrimination won't be tolerated here." Greg raised an eyebrow. "So you're suggesting we fire someone on your first day?" "No," Maya replied firmly. "I'm suggesting we enforce policies that already exist but haven't been taken seriously. If someone breaks the rules, they should face the appropriate consequences. It's about consistency, not revenge." Eleanor smiled faintly, clearly impressed by Maya's composure. In courage, Maya continued outlining her vision. She proposed mandatory sensitivity training for all staff, from pilots to baggage handlers, to ensure everyone understood the importance of treating passengers and each other with respect. She also suggested launching a mentorship program to support young people, especially those from underrepresented communities who wanted careers in aviation. As the meeting progressed, Maya noticed a shift in the room's energy. Some executives still looked doubtful, but others were nodding thoughtfully. A woman named Lisa, who led the marketing department, spoke up. "I like the idea of focusing on inclusivity," she said. "It could help us reconnect with customers who felt alienated by our brand. But we'll need a solid campaign to get the message across." "That's where you come in," Maya replied with a small smile. "I may not know everything about running a business, but I know I can't do this alone. I'll rely on experts like you to help bring these ideas to life." By the end of the meeting, Maya had earned a grudging respect from most of the team. They weren't fully convinced yet, but they couldn't deny her passion or her determination. As the executives filed out of the room, Greg lingered behind. He approached Maya hesitantly, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious curiosity. "You've got guts, kid," he admitted. "Not many people would walk into a room like this and hold their ground the way you did. Just don't let it go to your head, okay?" Maya grinned, feeling a surge of confidence. "Don't worry. I won't. But I hope you'll keep challenging me. That's how I'll learn." With Eleanor's guidance and the team's reluctant support, Maya dove headfirst into her new role. Over the next few weeks, she worked tirelessly, attending meetings, reviewing reports, and visiting airports to observe operations firsthand. She listened to feedback from employees and passengers alike, determined to understand every aspect of the business. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating. For the first time, Maya felt like she was truly making a difference and proving to herself and to everyone else that age was no barrier to leadership. As the weeks turned into months, Maya's presence began to reshape the airline in ways no one had anticipated. Her initiatives weren't just ideas scribbled on paper. They were actions that rippled through every level of the company. The mandatory sensitivity training sessions became more than just workshops. They sparked meaningful conversations among employees about bias, empathy, and respect. Pilots shared stories of passengers they'd gone out of their way to assist, while flight attendants discussed how small gestures, like remembering a passenger's name, could make someone feel valued. One of Maya's boldest moves came when she decided to address the incident that had started it all: her removal from the plane. Instead of quietly letting the matter fade away, she made it a cornerstone of her leadership. In a public statement, she acknowledged what had happened, apologized on behalf of the airline, and announced sweeping changes to prevent similar situations in the future. Among these changes was a new policy called Passenger First, which empowered crew members to resolve conflicts with compassion rather than confrontation. The response was overwhelming. Social media lit up with praise for Maya's transparency and courage. Passengers began sharing their own positive experiences with the airline, tagging posts with #FlyWithMaya. For the first time in years, the company's reputation started to improve. not because of flashy marketing campaigns, but because people genuinely felt heard and respected. However, not everyone was thrilled with Maya's rapid rise. Some longtime executives bristled at her unconventional methods, particularly her decision to prioritize ethics over profits. Greg, who had initially been skeptical, found himself clashing with Maya during strategy meetings. "We can't keep pouring money into these programs if they don't directly boost revenue," he argued one afternoon, slamming a report onto the table. "At this rate, we'll bankrupt ourselves trying to be nice." Maya didn't back down. "Being nice isn't the goal," she countered calmly. "Building trust is. Happy employees lead to happy customers, and happy customers stay loyal. That does boost revenue. It just takes time." Eleanor watched the exchange with quiet pride. After the meeting, she pulled Greg aside. "I know change is hard," she said, "but Maya's approach isn't reckless. It's visionary. Give her a chance to prove it." Meanwhile, Maya faced challenges outside the boardroom as well. Competitors launched smear campaigns, accusing her of being a puppet CEO, propped up by Eleanor. Critics questioned whether a teenager could handle the pressures of running a global enterprise. Even some passengers voiced doubts, wondering if the airline's newfound focus on inclusivity meant sacrificing efficiency or safety. But Maya refused to let negativity derail her. She leaned on her support system. Her mom, who reminded her of her father's belief in her potential. Eleanor, who offered wisdom born from decades of experience. And Lisa, the marketing executive who became an unexpected ally. Together, they brainstormed creative ways to showcase the airline's transformation, including a heartwarming ad campaign featuring real employees and passengers sharing their stories. Then came the day Maya had been dreading. Carla, the flight attendant who had kicked her off the plane, was called into her office. Maya had delayed this moment, unsure how to handle it. Firing Carla outright would have been easy, but Maya wanted something more, to turn this into a teaching moment, both for Carla and for the company. When Carla walked in, her shoulders slumped and her face pale, Maya greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I know this hasn't been easy for you." Carla blinked, caught off guard by Maya's kindness. I'm sorry," she stammered, "for everything. I never meant to cause trouble. I was just following protocol." "I understand," Maya replied gently. "But protocols aren't excuses for treating people poorly. You're talented at your job, Carla, and I believe you can grow from this. If you agree to complete additional training and work closely with HR to mentor others, I'd like to give you another chance." Tears welled up in Carla's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "You won't regret it." By the end of her trial period, Maya had silenced many of her critics, not through words, but through results. Employee morale soared, customer satisfaction ratings climbed, and even Greg admitted grudgingly that her strategies were working. As the board prepared to vote on whether to officially appoint her as CEO, Maya reflected on how far she'd come. She wasn't just proving herself to others, she was proving it to herself. And deep down, she knew her father would have been proud. The day of the board's final vote arrived, and Maya felt a mix of excitement and dread swirling in her stomach. Over the past 3 months, she had poured every ounce of energy into proving herself, not just to the executives, but to herself. She had faced challenges head-on, made tough decisions, and pushed for changes that some thought were impossible. But now, as she stood outside the conference room waiting to hear their verdict, self-doubt crept in. What if they say no? She whispered to Eleanor, who stood beside her, radiating calm confidence. What if all this was for nothing? Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. "You've already won," she said softly. "Win or lose today, you've changed this company, and yourself, in ways no one could have imagined. That's what truly matters." Before Maya could respond, the door opened, and Lisa poked her head out. "They're ready for you," she said with a small smile. Taking a deep breath, Maya walked into the room. The atmosphere was tense, with board members flipping through stacks of reports and exchanging murmurs. Greg sat at the far end of the table, his arms crossed, while others avoided eye contact altogether. For a moment, Maya wondered if she had misread their earlier signs of approval. Eleanor took her seat at the head of the table, signaling for Maya to stand at the front. "Thank you all for your hard work during this trial period." Eleanor began, her voice steady and authoritative. "We've seen significant improvements under Maya's leadership, improvements that go beyond numbers. Now it's time to decide whether she should officially become the CEO of this airline." One by one, the board members shared their thoughts. Some praised Maya's innovative ideas and ability to inspire those around her. Others admitted they had doubted her at first, but were now impressed by her dedication and results. However, not everyone was convinced. Greg voiced his concerns loudly, arguing that Maya's focus on ethics over profits was risky and unsustainable. Maya listened intently, her heart pounding. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, her voice clear despite the nerves bubbling inside her. "I understand your worries," she said, looking directly at Greg. "Running a business isn't easy, and I know I still have a lot to learn. But I also know that doing what's right isn't always easy either, and sometimes it means taking risks. My father used to tell me that flying requires balance. You can't soar unless you're willing to navigate turbulence. I believe this company can soar, but only if we stay true to our values." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then, slowly, hands began raising in favor of her appointment. One by one, the votes came in, until finally, the decision was unanimous. Maya would officially become the youngest CEO in the history of the aviation industry. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by a wave of pressure. This was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, bigger decisions to make, and higher stakes to manage. As celebrations broke out in the room, Maya slipped away to catch her breath. Standing by the window, she watched planes take off and land, their movements steady and purposeful. Eleanor joined her a few minutes later. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. "Overwhelmed," Maya admitted, "but also hopeful. I know I can't do this alone, though. I'll need help, from you, from the team, from everyone." "You'll have it," Eleanor assured her. "And remember, leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and trusting the people around you to find solutions together." As the days turned into weeks, Maya faced new hurdles. Competitors continued to attack her credibility, questioning how a teenager could lead such a massive organization. Internally, some employees resisted her changes, clinging to old habits and fearing the unknown. There were late nights spent reviewing budgets, difficult conversations with stakeholders, and moments when she questioned whether she was cut out for this role. But through it all, Maya held on to one truth. She wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it for every passenger who deserved respect, every employee who deserved fairness, and every dreamer like her who needed proof that age didn't define ability. With each challenge she overcame, she grew stronger, wiser, and more determined to leave a lasting legacy. By the end of her first year as CEO, the airline had transformed completely. Profits soared, customer loyalty reached record highs, and the company became a symbol of inclusivity and innovation. Maya had proven to the world, and to herself, that even the youngest voices could spark the biggest changes. And as she looked toward the future, she knew the sky was no longer the limit. It was just the starting point. By the end of her first year as CEO, Maya had not only transformed the airline, but also rewritten the rules of what leadership could look like. The company was thriving in ways no one had predicted. Profits were up, employee satisfaction had skyrocketed, and passengers couldn't stop raving about their experiences. What started as a struggling business on the brink of collapse had become a shining example of how compassion and innovation could go hand in hand. Maya stood at the podium during the annual shareholders meeting, her confidence now unshakable. Gone was the nervous teenager who had once doubted herself. In her place stood a poised young woman ready to take on the world. As she delivered her speech, the audience listened intently, hanging onto every word. When I first stepped into this role, Maya began, her voice steady and clear. I didn't know if I belonged here. I was scared, not just of failing, but of letting people down. But over time, I realized something important. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and doing your best to make things better for others. She paused, scanning the room filled with executives, employees, and journalists. This airline is more than just planes and profits. It's about people. Every passenger who steps onto one of our flights has a story, a destination, a dream. And it's our job to help them get there safely, comfortably, and with dignity. That's why we've worked so hard to create a culture of respect and inclusion, not because it's trendy, but because it's right. The crowd erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Among them was Eleanor, seated in the front row, her eyes glistening with pride. She had always believed in Maya's potential, but seeing her now, confident, capable, and compassionate, was nothing short of extraordinary. After the meeting, Maya returned to the airport where her journey had begun. This time, however, she wasn't an ordinary passenger. Employees greeted her warmly as she walked through the terminal, calling her by name and thanking her for the changes she'd brought to their lives. Passengers stopped to shake her hand or snap photos with her, their admiration evident. Maya soaked it all in, humbled by the impact she'd made. As she stood near Gate 17, the very spot where she'd been kicked off the plane a year earlier, Maya felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She thought about that day, the humiliation, the anger, the injustice. But instead of bitterness, she felt gratitude. If it hadn't been for that painful experience, she might never have met Eleanor or discovered her own strength. Eleanor joined her moments later, handing her a cup of coffee. "Feels different, doesn't it?" she asked with a knowing smile. Maya nodded, sipping her drink as she gazed out at the runway. Planes taxied back and forth, their engines roaring against the backdrop of a golden sunset. "It does," she replied softly. "I used to dream about flying, but I never imagined I'd be the one guiding the flight." "You're doing more than guiding it," Eleanor said. "You're charting a new course, for this company, for the industry, and for anyone who thinks they're too young or too different to make a difference." Maya smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Her journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. She still faced challenges, competitors trying to undermine her, critics questioning her decisions, but she welcomed them. Each obstacle was an opportunity to grow, to prove that kindness and determination could overcome even the toughest storms. That evening, as Maya boarded a flight to attend an international aviation summit, she took her usual seat by the window. As the plane ascended into the clouds, she closed her eyes, imagining her father sitting beside her, pointing out constellations and sharing stories of his adventures in the sky. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was following in his footsteps. She was walking alongside him, carving her own path. When the summit ended days later, Maya returned home to find a package waiting for her. Inside was a framed photo of her standing on the tarmac, surrounded by cheering employees. Beneath it was a note from Eleanor. "To Maya, the girl who turned turbulence into triumph. The sky will always be your starting point." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she held the frame close. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she also knew she was ready. With resilience, vision, and a heart full of dreams, Maya Johnson had proven that age was no barrier to greatness, and that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the most incredible